High school graduate, really? Everyone in our department has a college degree, you know? When Jake, who was much younger than me, reacted with surprise, I gave a wry smile. He's fine. A beautiful voice came from behind me. In front of me, Jake's eyes widened in astonishment. I slowly turned around. There stood a beautiful woman in a pale pink suit. My name is Henry. I'm 50 years old. Today is the company's Christmas party. Though I'm not yet working at the main office. I've been working at a local subsidiary for many years, but I'm set to transfer to the main office in January. When I got the call about the transfer, Ms. Taylor, the president, suggested I attend the Christmas party. Since it was scheduled the day after my move, I agreed to attend without hesitation. Wow, it's huge. I stood hesitant in front of the large hotel where the party was being held. The Christmas party was to be a standing buffet in the hotel's grand ballroom. I timidly stepped into the hotel and headed to the reception desk. The paper I received at the reception looked like a wedding seating chart. It seemed there were tables for each department. I was assigned to the System Development Department at the main office. Alternating glances between the grand ballroom and the paper, I headed toward my table. The party was set to start at 6 p.m., but at 5:40 p.m., many people had already gathered and were chatting happily. People of all ages were having fun conversations, but I felt a bit intimidated looking at my table. Everyone looked young. They seemed to be in their 20s or 30s. Are there no people my age here yet? Feeling a bit uneasy, I approached the table, and a young man noticed me. He stared at me intently. Under his gaze, I decided to introduce myself. Excuse me. I'm Henry, set to join the System Development Department next month. Nice to meet you. When I greeted them, several people introduced themselves to me. The young colleague who had been staring at me also spoke up. I'm Jake. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you? Since he asked timidly, I confidently replied, I'm 50. Exclamations of surprise came from various places, and Jake was especially astonished. 50. You'll be the oldest in our department. Have you done something amazing? Where have you been until now? He bombarded me with questions. I smiled wryly and explained that I hadn't done anything special and had been working at a local subsidiary. Jake frowned. Are you sure? Honestly, the workload here is intense. I studied programming all through college and worked hard in related activities. But even I struggle with the main office's work. He mentioned that he graduated from a well-known college. If such an eager young person says it's intense, it must be quite a workload. I braced myself a bit. Well, I guess an old high school graduate like me will have to work extra hard. When I said that, Jake's eyes widened. High school graduate, really? Everyone in our department has a college degree. Even our manager Mark is in his early 40s. Realizing what he had said, Jake lowered his voice. Did you maybe mess up at the subsidiary? An old high school graduate among young college graduates. Feel free to ask me anything. I'll help you out. He seemed to have misunderstood something. As he said that, Jake extended his right hand to me. He's probably not a bad kid. I smiled wryly and reached out to shake his hand. At that moment, he's fine. A beautiful voice came from behind me. In front of me, Jake's eyes widened in astonishment. I slowly turned around. There stood the president of the company, Ms. Taylor, dressed in a pale pink suit. She was 40, 10 years younger than me, but had a youthful, vibrant complexion. Her distinct double eyelids and slightly drooping eyes gave her a gentle appearance, and her lightly colored lips had a touch of deep red. With her good posture and slim legs, she looked great in heels. It's been a while. I greeted her. She looked slightly flustered. Henry. I've been looking forward to seeing you. Her eyes were slightly moist. Surprised by our interaction, Jake asked for an explanation. I smiled wryly and recalled the past. I joined this company right after graduating high school. I still remember how my heart raced when I first touched a computer in middle school. Using all my saved money, I bought a bulky, old-fashioned computer and started programming from a textbook. It was more fun than I had imagined, and my heart soared. My parents, who were busy with their jobs, naturally assumed I would go to a general high school and then to college. But I wanted to attend a technical high school. My parents said I could study engineering in college, but I insisted on studying computers right away. It was my paternal grandmother, who raised me in place of my busy parents, who persuaded them. She said, "I've never seen Henry so passionate. If he has something he loves, parents should support him." With her help, I convinced my parents. Graduating at the top of my class from the technical high school, I was recommended by the school and got a job at a top-tier company. Although it meant leaving my hometown, my grandmother was very happy. At 32, a turning point came. Ms. Taylor, the president's daughter, joined the company, and I, then in the systems department, became her mentor. I had heard that she was the only daughter of the president and would eventually take over the company. So, she was rotating through various departments to learn. I've studied in many departments, but this is really interesting. I want to learn more and more. With sparkling eyes, she eagerly learned programming languages. I taught her the work with a light-hearted feeling. She stayed in the systems department for about 6 months, and in that time, we became good friends, secretly going out for meals together. I had a faint crush on her. What I loved most was her bright smile and curiosity about everything. But she was a young and beautiful president's daughter. There was no way my feelings could reach her. I spent my days hiding my feelings, content to be her confidant. Then, my parents passed away. They were involved in a multi-car accident while out shopping on a weekend. In a daze, I confirmed their bodies and prepared for the funeral with the help of relatives. I noticed my grandmother's strange behavior on the night of the wake. "Where is Michael?" Suddenly, my grandmother called out my father's name. I had been staying up all night as I couldn't sleep, with my grandmother sleeping nearby. Ever since my parents' accident, my grandmother had been crying constantly, and when I arrived, she seemed to have shrunk in size. "Grandma! Dad is all ready," I began to tell her, my face grim. But my grandmother looked at me and smiled. "Oh, Michael, there you are." My drowsiness vanished in an instant. "Grandma? Do you know who I am?" When I asked in a panic, there was a brief pause before she sadly said, "Oh. Henry, you came." I felt slightly relieved, but her behavior continued to be strange at times. After the funeral, I took her to the hospital, where they said it was likely temporary confusion caused by the shock of losing her son and daughter-in-law. However, given her age, there was a risk of her developing dementia, and they advised not to leave her alone. So I requested a month off from work, which was granted. If it was just temporary shock, they expected improvement within a month. As Dr. Mitchell predicted, her strange behavior gradually improved, but her face always seemed sad. As the month was coming to an end, she forced a smile and said, "Henry, I've caused you trouble. And your company too. I'm okay now. So go back to work." Though her smile still seemed a bit precarious, I couldn't take more time off work, so I returned. But I couldn't focus, worried about my grandmother, and started making mistakes. Emily was worried about me and invited me out for dinner. It was embarrassing to have someone I had feelings for, 10 years younger, worry about me. But I wanted to lean on her. I talked about my grandmother. Should I quit my job? Should I go back to the countryside? I voiced my doubts and, taking advantage of the counter seating, rested my head on her shoulder. When I tried to gently hold her hand, it was wet. I hurriedly looked at Emily. She was crying. As I panicked, she said through her tears, "I think you should go back to your grandmother." I felt the same. I thought I had no choice. I wanted someone to push me. But I didn't want it to come from Emily. It felt like I was being rejected, even though I hadn't confessed my feelings. Through her falling tears, she said, "I'll be sad if you leave, but right now, I think your grandmother needs you more than anyone." Could I take her endless tears as a sign that she had some feelings for me? I quietly closed my eyes and said, "Thank you. I'll go back to her." I never confessed my feelings to Emily. And so, I returned to my hometown. However, thanks to Emily's intervention, I was transferred to a related subsidiary there. I was grateful to Emily. Although it was in the countryside, the subsidiary was a system development company, so I could continue doing the work I loved, albeit on a smaller scale. Emily smiled faintly and said, "Your knowledge and skills are too valuable to waste. Do your best over there." With her words in mind, I worked at the subsidiary for nearly 20 years while living with my grandmother. Then a few months ago, my grandmother passed away. When Emily contacted me hearing the news, I was surprised. "You're still an employee, even at the subsidiary," she said, showing her remarkable efficiency. At that time, she also suggested I return to the main office. Naturally, I hesitated. I had been peacefully doing system development in the countryside. I didn't think I could handle the hustle and bustle of the city anymore. But Emily playfully said over the phone, "Don't be so modest. The systems you've developed are all excellent, and some have even won awards, right? I know these things." Her teasing tone made me feel flustered. As I organized my grandmother's funeral and cleaned up the house, I pondered the idea of transferring to the main office. Inside me, a feeling was swelling up. I wanted to challenge myself in a tough environment once more. I wanted to be in the city's atmosphere again. I wanted to work with Emily again. After some thought, I called Emily. "Is the transfer to the main office still on the table?" My hesitant voice made her laugh on the other end of the line. "Of course." Buoyed by her cheerful response, I decided to return to the main office. I summarized the story, naturally omitting my feelings for Emily. To Jake and the others in the system development department who would be my colleagues starting in January. Everyone looked wide-eyed. So, unlike you guys who had privileged environments, I honed my skills in a more challenging setting. Every time a new programming language came out, I learned it desperately. "I won't lose to you youngsters yet." I said this, patting my chest. For some reason, everyone gave me a light round of applause. Looking at Emily, she raised the corner of her mouth in a grin. We planned for Henry to eventually serve as the head of the system development department. Her bombshell announcement surprised both me and my colleagues. "What about Mark?" Jake asked, confused, and Emily smiled. "Mark has always wanted to transfer to a different department. He wants to get into AI. If Henry becomes the head, we can grant Mark's wish." The right person for the right job. Both the previous president and Emily had always supported what the employees wanted to do. "Well, I have other departments to greet, so I'll be off." As she left, Emily squeezed my hand. "Henry, I look forward to working with you starting next month." With that, she left. In my hand, there was a piece of paper. In the restroom, I quietly opened it to find a map and the name of a restaurant. 2 hours later, the Christmas party ended. "Henry, let's go to the after party." Jake, quite drunk, invited me, but I declined and hurried to the place indicated on the map. It was a bar in a basement. As I hesitated to enter, someone spoke to me. It was Emily. "I'm glad you came. Let's go in." Her invitation made my heart leap. Come to think of it, it's been a long time since we were alone together. Memories of our dinners together nearly 20 years ago resurfaced. I felt my cheeks flush but snapped out of it. What is a 50-year-old man thinking? I pushed aside my sweet feelings and entered the bar. We sat in a small, cozy space. In front of the comfortable chairs was a small round table. A slight partition gave the space a private, intimate atmosphere. The sweet feelings I had pushed away began to swell again. We toasted, and I felt nervous. "Henry?" Suddenly, being called by her made my heart skip a beat. Ms. Taylor?" When I said that, Emily pouted. "I don't like being called that." She gave me a pointed look, making me flustered. "Well, then, Emily?" When I said that, Emily smiled contentedly. "That brings back memories. You were the only one who called me that." Her words triggered my memory. "But you asked me to call you Emily back then. You didn't like being called by your last name or with an honorific." Defending myself with the recalled memory, Emily replied, even though I asked. "Everyone else still called me Ms. Taylor or the president's daughter. You were the only one who called me by my first name." It made me happy. Her words made me blush. Noticing my reddening face, Emily laughed. "I'm glad you came back. I've always wanted to work with you again." As she said this, she took a sip of her cocktail. The liquid she had sipped passed down her throat. It seemed oddly sensual, making me hastily gulp down my whiskey. "Tell me more about your time in the countryside," she requested, and I began recounting my life with my grandmother. At first, my grandmother felt guilty about my return, but once we started living together, her strange behavior ceased and she smiled more often. She had always been my staunch supporter. When I was lonely as a child, she would sleep beside me, and despite her age, she took me to the park. I wanted her to live a long, healthy life. I buried my lingering feelings for Emily and my desire for fulfilling work in the city. We led a peaceful, though unexciting, life. One day, my grandmother suddenly collapsed and passed away. It happened in the small garden she tended as a hobby. It was early morning, before the harsh summer sun. When I woke up lazily, my grandmother was unusually absent. She was always there to prepare breakfast. Feeling uneasy, I went to the garden and found her lying there. She had passed away as if in her sleep. According to Dr. Mitchell, it was heat stroke. Despite the cool early morning, she had become dehydrated. Dr. Mitchell said she must have lost consciousness quietly, as if falling asleep. That was my only solace. If she hadn't suffered, then it was okay. I felt surprisingly calm, perhaps because of the conversation we had the day before her death. We had a habit of drinking coffee and talking a little every night. That day, my grandmother suddenly expressed her gratitude. "Henry, thank you. I'm happy because you're here." Her sudden gratitude made me laugh to hide my embarrassment. "What's with the suddenness?" My grandmother took a sip of coffee and smiled. "When you were born, your parents were busy, and I was left with all the babysitting. I used to think every day, I can't handle this mischievous boy. But when you grew up and left for the city, I realized that you gave me a purpose. Because of you, I could live happily. When you came back, I felt guilty but also extremely happy. But Henry, I'm okay now. If you have something you want to do, go and do it. It's your life, don't have regrets." Her words made me laugh. I'm always living the way I want. I'm here because I want to be, and besides, your cooking is the best, I said, laughing it off. I wonder if she knew it was our farewell. Did she say those things so I wouldn't have any regrets? It was perfect timing. "Grandma, you are amazing." As I arranged her funeral, I looked up at the clear sky and said this with a clear voice. And now, several months have passed. Winter arrived in no time. I finished my story and downed the rest of my whiskey. Emily's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm glad the decision we made that day was the right one," she said with a smile. "Yeah, thank you." I was able to see my grandmother off without regrets. I expressed my gratitude, and Emily narrowed her eyes. Seeing her expression, I let my true feelings slip out. But I was lonely. "I missed seeing you, Emily." My words made Emily blush slightly. "When I went back to the countryside, I tried not to think about you, tried not to get any information about you. However, as a subsidiary employee, I still received information about the main office. When I heard that Mr. Taylor had retired and become chairman and that Emily, still in her 30s, had become president, I couldn't help but take action. A few years ago, when Emily became president, I sent a congratulatory bouquet. Anonymously. I sent the flowers with the thought that it would be enough for them to be by her side, even if only for a moment. That was my sentiment when I sent them. "Of course, it was you, Henry," Emily murmured contentedly. "Of course." Emily spoke joyfully. "Somehow, just somehow, when I saw that anonymous bouquet, I thought of you. I wasn't sure, so I couldn't reach out." Then, she gazed at me. "Now that I think about it, thank you for the beautiful bouquet. The colors were lovely and conveyed your supportive feelings. So, look." Emily showed me her phone screen. There was the bouquet I had agonized over with the florist. The next screen showed the same flowers preserved in a glass case. As I looked confused, Emily laughed. "They're called preserved flowers. They're specially processed to last a long time." I sent the flowers hoping it would be by her side even for only a moment. Those flowers I sent remain by her side even now. A warm feeling surged in my chest. When I decided to return to the countryside, there was something I couldn't say. Can I say it now? I looked directly into Emily's eyes. I loved you, Emily. And I still do. Since parting ways back then, I had never been able to let go of my feelings for Emily. And I've remained single all these years. Although, to be honest, it's also because I wasn't very popular. Emily blushed deeply. So, back then, you had feelings for me? I nodded yes in response. Emily covered her face with both hands. Thank goodness, you didn't tell me back then. Unsure of her true feelings, I stayed silent. If you had told me then, I wouldn't have been able to let you go back to your grandmother. No, I definitely couldn't have, definitely. She exhaled deeply, then removed her hands from her face and looked at me. I also have something I couldn't say back then. I loved you, Henry. And of course, I still do. Emily's confession mirrored mine. I was utterly surprised. I've always loved you, couldn't forget about you. I acted strong and arranged for you to be assigned to the subsidiary. But I truly wanted you to stay by my side and marry you. Even though I was busy with work, I turned down all the arranged marriage meetings. Because I couldn't forget about you. She explained that her parents had pressured her to marry and produce an heir. Actually, my father never insisted on keeping the company in the family. But he did want me to get married. And somehow, I've reached 40. I was beyond surprised, I was astounded. It's understandable why anyone would think that a bright, beautiful, and kind person like Emily would be someone I'd always remember fondly. But why had she kept thinking about someone as unremarkable as me? I couldn't quite grasp it. When I voiced this, Emily pouted. To me, you're my ideal man. You worked passionately, were skilled, listened to me patiently, and valued your grandmother. But most importantly, embarrassed by her exaggerated praise, I looked at her as she paused. Back then, people used to say I was just the president's daughter dabbling in various jobs. But I wanted to understand every employee's work and hear their suggestions for improvement. Even though spending just 6 months in each department might not seem like much, I was only given simple tasks in other departments. But you treated me like any other junior colleague and taught me the job thoroughly. I was surprised to hear that Emily had been treated that way in other departments. Looking back, I did remember teaching her all the details. I enjoyed seeing her absorb knowledge and felt joy in her enthusiasm. Because you were so eager and bright-eyed, I couldn't help it, I said, blushing. Emily smiled warmly. The way you called me, taught me, and treated me like everyone else made me very happy. It seemed that not treating her differently had actually drawn her to me. Emily chuckled. Henry, you treat everyone equally. Whether it's someone like Jake, who was rude at the Christmas party, or someone like me, the president's daughter. That's something I find very special. She smiled at me, making my heart swell. Seeing my reaction, she laughed and leaned her cheek on her hand resting on the small round table. She was now a little closer. If you keep dragging this on, we'll both be 40. Will you take responsibility? She asked, looking up at me with her head on her hand. I gently patted her head. If you're okay with an old guy like me, anytime. At that moment, she blushed deeply, her face turning as red as a boiled octopus. And then, this is a bit embarrassing to ask at 40, but, as she spoke, her face turned increasingly red. Could you say well done and pat my head? Feeling a bit embarrassed myself, I followed her request. Well done, you really did great, I said, gently patting her head. Watching Emily cover her face in embarrassment, I thought about her. She had carried the heavy responsibility of being the company's president. I hoped I could ease her burden, even a little, and be someone she could lean on. Looking at Emily still adorable as ever, I smiled. 2 years later, I held her hand, offering words of encouragement as she struggled. Since then, we had gotten engaged rather quickly and visited Emily's parents. Her father, now the chairman, remembered me. He acknowledged my efforts after losing my parents and taking care of my grandmother, and entrusted Emily to me. Though we hadn't explicitly discussed it, I didn't think we'd have children. I thought we would live peacefully together. However, to our surprise, a child naturally came into our lives. Emily, now a high-risk pregnancy due to her age, took great care of her health. Her father, who had been chairman, returned to active duty. The employees were very supportive as well. Even today, when I received a sudden call that Emily had gone into labor, Jake, who had become a close friend since the Christmas party, told me, "What are you doing here?" "I'll handle the work." Go quickly. I'm sure my parents and grandmother are watching over us from heaven." "Hang in there. Everyone is cheering for you," I said to Emily. At that moment, Dr. Johnson's voice echoed, "Okay, relax, you've done well," followed by the strong cries of a healthy baby. Emily and I looked at each other, then at our newborn. A little angel had come into our lives. A tiny life, born with everyone's hopes and dreams. Looking at the shining new life in my arms, I vowed to cherish this happiness and live my life without letting it slip away. I made this promise as I gazed at our newborn's radiant face. "You're banned from the culinary world." Not long ago, I was celebrated as a young prodigy chef who achieved 3 Michelin stars faster than anyone in history. But now, I'm living a life of downfall due to false accusations. I never intended to step into a kitchen again, but I couldn't ignore the SOS from the beautiful manager I met at the inn, pleading, "Please, help us," so here I was, back in the kitchen once again. Little did I know that this decision would set my halted fate back into motion. My name is Alex Brown. In my early 30s, I won a top prize in an international cooking contest and was hailed as a young genius chef, frequently featured in the media. My cookbooks became bestsellers, I was welcomed as the head chef at a top hotel, and I cooked for VIPs abroad multiple times. After working at the hotel for 3 years, I opened my own restaurant. Naturally, the restaurant thrived and earned Michelin stars. Even after a year, media coverage didn't stop, and I think I became intoxicated with my own talent. However, success often breeds jealousy. The recipe for my new dish, which I was planning to enter into the next competition, was stolen without being realized. Unaware, I submitted the dish to the competition, only to find out that the menu had been unveiled at another restaurant the day before. Despite explaining it was a misunderstanding, I was accused of plagiarism, disqualified from the competition, and my downfall began. The same media that once praised me now relentlessly reported my plagiarism scandal, with reporters swarming my home and restaurant at all hours. Customers stopped coming to my restaurant, and I had to close down all 10 of my branches nationwide. Exhausted and seeking a place where no one knew me, I left my apartment. I decided to head to the place where my great-grandfather grew up. Although my great-grandfather had passed before I was born, I had heard from my grandmother that he was a chef, and I felt a connection to my roots. After a journey of transfers by train and bus, I arrived in Maine. Though it was Maine, it was in the rural part, essentially the countryside. The nostalgic landscape was filled with rice fields and a mix of old and new buildings in the village. Since there were almost no tourists, outsiders stood out. People looked at me curiously, but no one seemed to know who I was. Relieved, I walked through the town and saw an old culinary inn. The building looked old but sturdy and grand. I decided to stay there for a while. Inside, the inn was old but elegant. When I rang the bell at the empty front desk, a woman in a classy dress appeared from behind the curtain. "Sorry to keep you waiting." "Welcome." She greeted me with a smile that was as radiant as a flower. People often compare women to flowers, but she truly embodied that comparison. I was captivated for a moment. "Sir? Is something wrong?" Her words brought me back to reality. "Sorry, do you have a room available starting today?" She probably thought I was strange. My gaze naturally lowered. Then my eyes caught her delicate, fair fingers. Her modestly manicured fingers had no ring. She looked to be in her early 30s. Was she single despite her beauty at this age? My heart started pounding. "How long will you be staying?" Her voice suddenly brought me back to the present. "How long will you be staying?" She repeated the same question. "Sorry, I haven't decided yet," I said. She seemed to understand. Understood. For long-term stays, we settle the bill weekly. Is that acceptable? Of course, that's fine. After settling the bill for the first week, the woman loaded my luggage onto a cart. Sorry for the late introduction. I am the manager of this inn, my name is Ashley. She led the way and introduced herself. Nice to meet you, Ashley. When we reached the room, Ashley made coffee for me. Her graceful movements were mesmerizing. I couldn't take my eyes off her. It makes me nervous when you stare at me like that. With a slightly troubled smile, Ashley served the coffee and sweets. Sorry, I was captivated by your elegant movements. Oh, I'm sure you're quite popular with the ladies, Mr. Brown. Ashley chuckled as she placed the coffee on the table. She was probably used to receiving such advances. She brushed it off smoothly. The thought that she might have seen it as a come-on made me feel incredibly embarrassed. Our inn takes pride in its cuisine. We have fresh ingredients and our head chef is very skilled, so please look forward to it. Let us know if you have any food preferences or allergies. With that, Ashley left the room. A few days later. As Ashley had mentioned on the first day, the food at the inn was quite good. This inn is really thriving. Everyone always seems busy, I said to one of the waitresses who came to serve me. It seemed to be frequently used by locals for celebrations and memorial services. She replied, "We've been fortunate to have the support of locals since the previous owner," but then her voice trailed off. The reason was that the head chef had recently changed. Then the waitress quickly excused herself and left. One day, as usual, I had a spa all to myself and was thinking, this is bliss. On my way back to my room when I passed some guests who had just finished their meal. The snippets of their conversation caught my attention. It's not bad, but the food's quality has dropped. Well, Kevin's cooking was exceptional. Indeed, the menu is quite repetitive now. It appeared that the former head chef, Kevin, had been highly regarded. And many guests now stayed out of loyalty despite feeling the current chef's cooking wasn't up to par. Even though I intended to leave the culinary world behind, such comments piqued my curiosity about the previous chef's cooking. The former head chef, huh? My murmured words made Ashley, who was walking toward me, stop in her tracks. Oh, Ashley. Seeing her suddenly stop, I called out to Ashley. The former head chef was my father. He passed away a few years ago, and now Robert has taken over. I see. I overheard some guests saying Kevin's cooking was exceptional, so I was curious about what kind of food your father made. Ashley blinked a few times. Are you interested in cooking, Mr. Brown? No, I'm more of a specialist in eating. I dodged the question casually. If it got out that I could cook, it might lead to more trouble. Are you enjoying the food here? It's delicious. But don't you think it's time to stop calling me Mr. Brown? When I suggested this, Ashley looked puzzled. Is there a problem with it? Well, I've been staying here for a week now, and this inn is starting to feel like home to me. Being called Mr. Brown feels a bit too formal. Ashley thought about it for a moment. Then, how about Alex? That sounds good. I agreed, feeling satisfied. Got it, I'll call you that from now on. Ashley replied with a smile and then disappeared into the busy kitchen. I've been in this town for a week, and with nothing much to do, walking has become my daily routine. There are several walking routes, and I've started to become familiar with the residents I meet during my strolls. At first, we only exchanged greetings, but now we have casual conversations. And recently they've even invited me for coffee on their porches or occasionally into their homes for meals. In return, I help out with small chores like weeding their gardens or painting walls. It's a way to pass the time, get to know the locals, and carve out a place for myself here. Days passed quickly this way. One day, as I was returning from my routine walk, I heard voices arguing near the inn staff entrance. One of the voices was Ashley's. The other sounded like a man's. You can't just spring this on us. It's not sudden, I've been telling you for a while. That's a different matter. Anyway, it's up to you to decide. The man said this and left without noticing me. I hesitated to call out to Ashley and decided to walk away. The next morning, I woke up early and got ready for a walk. When I came down to the lobby, I saw Ashley on the phone, looking pale. Is something wrong? I felt hesitant to ask in the middle of her call, but when she finished and our eyes met, I couldn't help but inquire. We have a wedding reception scheduled for this afternoon, but Robert collapsed and can't make it. Ashley looked devastated as she lowered her eyes. Ashley, the ingredients for today have arrived. Please accept them for now. I'm going to see Robert. It seemed the staff were quite panicked. I'm sorry to pry, but did Robert have a sudden illness? He says he collapsed, but in reality, it seems I upset him. Anyway, I need to go convince him. I grabbed Ashley's arm to stop her as she was about to leave. I had a gut feeling that letting her go wasn't the right move. It was just an instinct. Today's reception is hosted by a prominent local family. If we can't serve the food, not only will we have to pay a large cancellation fee, but we might not be able to continue running this in here. It would affect not just me, but all our employees. Ashley tried to pull her arm away. Can you let me handle the cooking for the reception? That's impossible. You're not even a chef. She looked at me in disbelief. I may not be a chef now, but I used to be one. Ashley looked stunned. You were a chef? I left the profession before coming here. I even worked in a hotel kitchen, so I think I can help. She bit her lip hard. Please help us. With that, she led me to the kitchen. I started by checking the ingredients. Although my specialty isn't the local cuisine of this region, as a professional, I have a good grasp of various culinary styles. I excel at creating fusion dishes that combine with local foods. Leave it to me. As I looked over the ingredients, I began giving directions to the kitchen staff. At first, they seemed bewildered that a mere guest was taking charge, but Ashley's words, "Everyone, follow Alex's instructions," got them moving. We didn't have much time before the reception. I checked what was missing, gathered what we needed, and proceeded to cook the dishes in the order they would be served. That's amazing. Who is that guy? I don't really know what his title is. I could hear the surprised voices of the staff and Ashley talking about me. But this was not the time for that. I was driven solely by the desire to help Ashley. The preparations went smoothly, and the reception started as planned. In both the kitchen and the dining area, everyone was running around like a storm. I kept cooking, wiping the sweat from my forehead. It was a long-lost feeling of being completely absorbed in the cooking. Dessert is ready. With that announcement, the tension in my body finally eased. I didn't know how things were going in the banquet hall, but at least we had made it this far without any complaints. As I let out a sigh and was about to take off my apron, a staff member in charge of serving rushed into the kitchen, saying, "The guests are asking to see today's head chef." I froze. Was there something wrong with the food? I quickly tidied up my appearance and stepped out of the kitchen, where Ashley was waiting for me. This way. The guests were very pleased and would like to thank the head chef personally. Oh, that's a relief. I felt all the tension leave my body. I smiled and faced the man who was the host of today's event, a prominent local figure. The food today was excellent. Are you the new head chef here? I recognized the elderly man. He was the chairman of a leading construction machinery manufacturer, known even outside the industry. His nephew had recently made his debut in politics. No wonder Ashley was so desperate. They were a well-known family in this rural area. I had met him once at a VIP party when I was working in a hotel kitchen. It was just a brief greeting a few years ago, so he probably didn't remember me. I'm honored by your compliments. Well, really, this is the second time I've had such delicious food. The first was at a party a few years ago. Today was an important occasion to celebrate my nephew's wedding locally. Thank you for the wonderful meal. Mr. Johnson joyfully grabbed my hand and shook it vigorously. His genuine words stirred something within me. When your father ran this place, we often used it. After his unfortunate passing, I heard the inn was struggling, but with a chef like you, it should be fine. I'll definitely come back for a meal privately. He then turned to Ashley, looking very satisfied. Thank you. It's an honor to be a part of the memorable wedding reception for your nephew. With that, the reception ended smoothly, and Ashley and I, along with the other staff, saw the guests off. Thank you so much for today. Thanks to you, we were able to keep the inn from closing. Ashley appreciated me deeply. I'm just glad I could help. Still, I was surprised. I didn't know you were the chef of a Michelin 3 stars restaurant. I'm a former chef. I'm not in the business anymore. Ashley looked down, seemingly lost in thought. What's wrong? She started speaking hesitantly, avoiding eye contact. I saw you in the kitchen, Alex, and you looked so alive, so happy. It was clear how much you love cooking. Oh, thank you. Not knowing how to respond, I could only say that before Ashley said goodnight and quickly left. The next day, having returned from tentative head chef to just a guest, I spent the day leisurely, as if yesterday had been a dream. I had a spa again, and after a refreshing soak, I returned to my room to find Ashley preparing dinner. Thank you so much for yesterday. Not at all. It was a great experience for me to manage the kitchen and receive such appreciation from the guests after so long. So, is Robert coming back? Ashley paused for a moment. I still haven't been able to contact Robert. But the menu for the guests' meals is planned out for the next month, so we should be fine. It seemed she thought I was worried about my own meals. What about events like banquets or dinner parties, like yesterday? Ashley's face clouded over. If Robert doesn't come back, would it be alright if I filled in? Ashley looked up quickly at my suggestion. If it's not too much trouble for you. No, really, I'm happy to help if I can. Her happiness was so evident that it made me a little embarrassed. If you could help out at the inn, Alex, it would be wonderful. I thought it might be presumptuous of me to offer, so I was hesitant to bring it up. Me too. I wanted to ask, but I thought it would be too forward, so I didn't say anything. We both looked at each other and laughed. It felt good to be relied upon by Ashley. As I enjoyed the last bit of hospitality as a guest, I watched Ashley smile. Just as we were talking, another attendant arrived. Ashley, there's an urgent call for you. I'll be right there. Please take over for me. Ashley stood up, entrusted my service to the attendant, and left. Seems like things are busy. After yesterday, Mr. Johnson, the guest from yesterday, praised our inn's cuisine highly. We've been getting several inquiries from afar about hosting meals and banquets here. The front desk staff are thrilled but overwhelmed. It appeared the staff were unaware of Robert's absence. I decided to keep quiet about it. More importantly, it looked like things were going to get busier. That night, I went to bed thinking about new menu ideas. I realized I loved cooking more than I thought. The next day, I was welcomed into the kitchen by the staff. The following days were a whirlwind. I juggled a packed schedule, and even after the day ended, I stayed in the kitchen, coming up with new dishes. Initially, most guests came through Mr. Johnson's connections, but gradually, word spread via social media and reviews. Amidst the hectic days, the inn became famous, and Ashley was featured in the media as the beautiful manager. Many requests for interviews as the head chef came in, but I declined them all. If my face got out, my past would be dug up, and it would lead to sensational reporting again. That could bring trouble to the inn that was just starting to thrive. I wanted to remain behind the scenes, supporting Ashley. Ashley, not being very media savvy herself, generally declined interviews and stepped in for me when necessary. I built good relationships with the staff and grew closer to Ashley, finding my place here. Alex, you finally have a day off tomorrow. We had planned to go shopping together for the first time in 2 weeks. Sorry for not giving you any breaks. It's all right. Working with you is enjoyable, Ashley. I enjoy working with you too, but a day off is different, right? There's no event tomorrow, and the assistant manager will handle the guests. So you can take it easy. Seeing Ashley so excited made me feel happy too. The next day, as we were heading to the employee entrance to go out, I saw a familiar man waiting. Did you think you could take over the head chef position so easily? It was Robert, the head chef who had been out of contact. What do you want now? You've been unreachable. Ashley retorted sharply to Robert. You're the one who abandoned your job, and Alex stepped in to help us. There's no place for you at this inn anymore. You're being deceived by this man. If you keep him here, he'll bring the whole inn down. With that, Robert thrust a tabloid magazine at Ashley, open to a specific page. Where did you get this? It was an article about the plagiarism scandal that had led me to quit being a chef. No matter how much I insisted it was a lie, the media wouldn't stop, and I was branded as a dishonest chef who stole recipes. I didn't want to be in the spotlight anymore. I just wanted to use my skills for the people I cared about and live quietly. Now, My secret was revealed to the one person who I didn't want to know. I don't believe such an article. Alex doesn't need to steal anyone's recipes, Ashley said confidently to Robert. I was stunned by her unwavering trust in me. The truth doesn't matter. The public believes it. Isn't that enough? If you stay with this guy, the inn's reputation will suffer. Fire him and let me come back. When Robert tried to grab Ashley's hand, I instinctively swatted it away. What are you doing? Can't handle the truth, so you resort to violence? Regardless of my situation, a chef who abandons the kitchen isn't much of a chef. Don't you love cooking? Don't you have any pride as a chef? Robert burst into laughter. He clutched his stomach as if he couldn't contain his amusement. Love cooking? Hearing a famous chef say something so naive is hilarious. Get real. He reached for Ashley's hand again, but this time she shook it off and moved behind me. I already rejected your proposal. Leave me alone. She peeked over my shoulder, glaring at Robert with genuine disgust. I was going to handle this quietly, but if that's your attitude, I'll spread this all over the media and social networks. Disgraced chef working as head chef here. You'll be ruined. Go ahead, do as you like. Alex's cooking speaks for itself. Those who appreciate it will know the truth. We won't be defeated by your threats. Ashley responded defiantly, making me laugh. Why are you laughing, Alex? Being with you makes my past seem unimportant. The tense atmosphere suddenly lightened. Sure, spread it all over the media or social media. I'll just keep making food that people love. Let's go, Ashley. Wait, we're not done here. Robert was interrupted by another voice. A lowly chef like you trying to ruin his future? Know your place. The voice was commanding and filled with anger, making us stop in our tracks. It was Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson? Why are you here? Your cooking reminded me. The dish that moved me at a party years ago, that was you, wasn't it? You remember that? Mr. Johnson smiled at me, then turned to Robert with a stern expression. I did some investigating. You were an assistant on the rival team in that competition. And you worked in the pastry section of Alex's hotel until just days before. In the hotel kitchen, we worked as a team. Since the pastry section handled desserts, their kitchen was separated. As I was in charge of main dishes, I didn't even know Robert worked there. Were you in the same workplace? I also spoke to your former colleagues. My guess is that you stole the recipe and gave it to the rival team, didn't you? Robert started trembling. I'm a fan of his cooking. I'll keep investigating to clear his name. Robert backed away as Mr. Johnson pressed him, then turned and ran off. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. No need to thank me. Being able to enjoy your cooking locally is a dream come true for me. Ashley and I appreciated Mr. Johnson deeply. After that, Robert was banished from the area. Rumor has it that he was completely expelled from the culinary world. Soon after, thanks to Mr. Johnson, my name was cleared, and the inn became incredibly successful, never short of guests. Furthermore, the inn was awarded 3 Michelin stars. After that, we started getting many international visitors, and the inn's cuisine gained worldwide recognition. On a rare day off, Ashley and I visited her father's grave. We reported the inn's success and our engagement. On the next break, we planned to visit the grave of my great-grandfather, who led me to this place. And decades later, that wedding reception was unforgettable, wasn't it? Even after 30 years, Ashley often talks about our reception. Our wedding was grand, with Mr. Johnson and his wife acting as our witnesses. The reception was held at the inn, and I, the groom, personally cooked for the guests. With you in the kitchen, I had to sit at my table alone. I know, I'm sorry about that. But cooking was the only way I could think of to show my gratitude to the guests. It's so like you, and I love it. It's still a wonderful memory. The inn we've managed for 30 years will soon be taken over by our children. After working tirelessly for so long, we're looking forward to enjoying our retirement and all the things we'll do together. Did you force yourself on me? I silently nodded in response to the question from my beautiful CEO, Emily Roberts. No way, that's disgusting. Get out of my sight immediately. She shouted at and insulted me. I was thrown out of the hospital room. I never imagined that saving a life would make me so hated. A few days later, I was called to Ms. Roberts' office, where she glared at me from her desk. You don't think you can get away with what you did, do you? How do you plan to take responsibility? I understand. I'll take responsibility and quit. Please fire me. Suddenly, Ms. Roberts appeared flustered. My name is Mike. I work in a somewhat unusual office. Walking on a gray tile carpet and opening a heavy door, and there is my desk right before the CEO's office. After sitting at my desk, I booted up my computer before Ms. Roberts arrived and reviewed her schedule for the day. Then, I selected the lunch menu for the web meeting with the executives scheduled for the next day, input their addresses, and made reservations with the catering service. I also contacted an IT company to confirm next week's consultation appointment. Yes, my job is a secretary. A personal secretary to the CEO, to be precise. It might seem odd for a man to be a CEO's secretary, but it's becoming more common in companies nowadays. Generally, a secretary's job is to support the executive comprehensively. In the public sector, this might be a career path to promotion. But in the private sector, that's not the case. Excuse me. There was a knock on the door. After I called out, a female staff member from the secretarial department entered, saying the ordered business cards had arrived. She placed Ms. Roberts and my business cards on the desk and left the room. I took some of my business cards and set them in my card holder. Mike Williams, Secretarial Department. The title still doesn't feel quite right. If I were a political secretary, like a chief of staff or senior secretary, I could be proud. But as a mere secretary in a private company? There's nothing to boast about. However, given my personality, I prefer supporting others from the background rather than standing out, so this role suits me. Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Roberts. She is the CEO of this company, Emily Roberts, a beautiful woman. What's today's schedule? Yes. At 10 a.m., there's a meeting with George from Continent Trading. At 1 p.m., there's a web lunch meeting with Mr. Smith, the director of the Western Division, and at 4 p.m. I informed Ms. Roberts of her schedule and served her coffee at her desk. You're only good at making coffee. Thank you. Such small teases from her were expected. I've already gotten used to her personality. I returned to my desk and started preparing the presentation materials for the event Ms. Roberts would be speaking at over the weekend. As a child, I preferred drawing and playing house with the neighborhood girls inside rather than playing outside. My father wanted to play baseball or soccer with me, but I preferred baking cookies and cooking with my mother, which disappointed him. My reserved nature meant I didn't stand out, but I always helped classmates with chores and tasks they disliked without complaining. My meticulous nature made me a reliable person to my teachers and classmates because I always completed their requests perfectly. By high school, I had developed a knack for observing my peers and predicting potential trouble. Advising classmates and listening to the girls' concerns, I became known as a considerate person by the time I graduated. Mike, you have such high girl skills. If you were a girl, I'd totally marry you. Classmates often said things like that, and in my teens, I focused on being a reliable person while avoiding the spotlight. But that was just a facade. In reality, I'm not that nice guy. I only act like a nice person for my own benefit. I have never thought about doing anything for others. I realized in middle school that pretending to be a good person and gaining trust was highly beneficial for me. Because of that, my grades improved, and I wasn't bullied by my classmates. I could get people to do favors for me, and when there was a disagreement in class, my opinion usually prevailed. This was all calculated. Even my parents, who wanted me to be more masculine, didn't understand my true nature. You're quiet because of your personality, but it's your life. So live it as you like, they said. No one ever saw through my true self. Using the same strategy, I gained the favor of my college professors, and without even needing to wear a recruitment suit, I secured a job at a well-known large company through a professor's recommendation. In the future, I aim to stay close to the CEO in the secretarial department, get in her good graces. and eventually hold a position where I can influence the board meetings. This became my goal the moment I was assigned to the secretarial department. Early on, I was summoned to the executive room by the chairman, Mr. Parker, who asked me to support Ms. Roberts as her personal secretary. I had initially intended to apply for an administrative role, but it seems there was already an agreement between my professor and Mr. Parker. And I had no choice from the start. Mr. Parker was looking for someone who could firmly speak to and support his daughter. My meticulous nature and considerate personality, which Professor Johnson had mentioned, convinced him I was suitable to support her. Thus, I was assigned to the secretarial department the day after joining the company and became Ms. Roberts' secretary. Working closely with Ms. Roberts, I found that while she was beautiful, she was somewhat sloppy and struggled with organization and considering others' feelings. Mr. Parker's words, more of a babysitter than a secretary, initially seemed like a joke, but they started to feel more accurate over time. I supported Ms. Roberts diligently, albeit with a wry smile. From the first day, I not only followed her instructions but also took care of cleaning and organizing the CEO's office in her absence. And perfectly timed serving coffee. I studied other CEOs' behaviors and learned the necessary skills for an executive, such as how to communicate and present oneself to external parties. Moreover, I studied essential managerial skills like sensing market trends and flexible communication, making suggestions to her. However, Ms. Roberts often rejected my well-intentioned efforts, saying, "I didn't ask you to do that. What do you understand who have never managed? Just do what I tell you and don't interfere with me." Her stubbornness was partly my fault. On business trips, she was often looked down upon or treated coldly just because she was a woman. And she dealt with the stress of a male-dominated environment daily. Sometimes, she was even compared to me in a derogatory way. "He's more suited to be the CEO than you. It's not enough to just have a pretty face." After hearing such comments, she would always drag me out for a drink. "Ms. Roberts, you should stop now. There's a web meeting tomorrow, let's go home." "Shut up. You're always meddling in my business. How I talk or behave is none of your concern. You're so annoying." And she would continue drinking until she passed out. Ms. Roberts, who was weak to alcohol, would always pass out and sometimes even forget what happened. "Good morning. Here, have some of this." The day after heavy drinking, I would always place a bowl of soup on her desk. "This is the best for hangovers." Ms. Roberts would slowly bring the steaming bowl to her lips and sip it. Delicious. Seeing her calm expression, I would start my work for the day. She eventually developed a routine of starting her day with either soup or coffee I made. However, being a CEO seems to come with a lot of stress. The frequency of her heavy drinking gradually increased, and each time I would take care of Ms. Roberts and advise her to quit drinking. But no matter how much I asked her to stop, she never listened. "You're so presumptuous for a secretary. What I drink is none of your business. You're so persistent." One time, Ms. Roberts was harshly criticized by Mr. Thompson from a client company, who compared her unfavorably to her predecessor, Mr. Parker, and dismissed her business vision. On the way back, I accompanied her for a drink as usual, but she was more deeply dejected than ever before, slumping against the wall in despair. Seeing her like that was hard for me as well. While I was searching for words to comfort her, she quickly succumbed to the alcohol. Predictably, she felt sick midway and collapsed in the restroom, so I had no choice but to take her to my place. The next morning, she woke up and, realizing she was in my room, suddenly panicked. "Ah, my head, why am I in your room?" "Did you?" Ms. Roberts started checking her clothes. "You passed out, so I let you sleep in my bed. Don't worry, I didn't do anything. I hanged your jacket over there." "Well, I see." I had her take a shower while I prepared breakfast. "This feels a bit strange, having breakfast together with you, Ms. Roberts. Here, your usual soup." But she seemed different from her usual self, looking rather down. She didn't touch her spoon, and the soup got cold. "Are you feeling unwell? Or is there something hurting you?" I asked. Ms. Roberts responded, "I'm fine." "But why do you care so much about me? It seems beyond the scope of your job." "Really? It's just an extension of my job. Nothing more than that. I see. She answered sadly for some reason. After that, we got ready and headed to the office together. Feeling remorseful for staying at my place, she declared she would stop drinking from that day. A few days after her declaration, a company drinking party was suddenly organized, and for some reason, Ms. Roberts was strongly encouraged by the employees to join them in the cafeteria. It turned out to be Ms. Roberts' birthday. The employees had secretly prepared a surprise birthday party for her. Although she was surprised, Ms. Roberts appreciated their thoughtfulness and took her seat. And then the employees opened champagne and poured it into her glass. I sent her a look that said absolutely do not drink and subtly shook my head, but she couldn't refuse their goodwill. Thank you. I'll have some, she said and drank it down in one gulp. Encouraged by this, the employees said, "Oh, Ms. Roberts can drink? She's the star today, so come on, have some more." And they started pouring her drinks one after another. I watched nervously but felt a bit relieved seeing her surprisingly sharp. However, after she went to the restroom, I had a bad feeling and quietly followed her. As expected, I found her collapsed face down in the hallway just before the restroom. I rushed over and, while scolding her, helped her sit against the wall. "Ms. Roberts, are you okay? I told you not to drink so much." I quickly grabbed a plastic bag and filled it with mineral water, then fetched a blanket. When I returned, she was breathing heavily, and suspecting acute alcohol poisoning, I urged her to drink water. I can't drink anymore. I feel so sick." She responded with slurred speech, but I had to dilute her blood alcohol level. "Things are getting blurry, Excuse me." I held the plastic bag to her mouth and made her vomit by sticking my fingers down her throat. "Now, drink some water. I told you. I'm full. You have to drink. If you don't, you might pass out." But she was so full and she refused to drink. Oh, this is frustrating. "Excuse me." After a quick apology, I loosened her collar slightly and gave her water mouth to mouth. Ms. Roberts seemed to lose consciousness. I quickly called the company doctor. Leaving her with the doctor for a moment, I returned to the party to explain to the employees. Ms. Roberts had an urgent matter to attend to and had to leave. I hid the truth to avoid worrying them and let the party continue as a regular company gathering. I returned to Ms. Roberts, and to be safe, drove her to the hospital. She was given a drip and fortunately was not in serious danger. The doctor advised her to stay overnight just in case, so I called Mr. Parker, but he was too busy to come right away. So I stayed with her for the night. The next day, Ms. Roberts woke up without any issues and was told by the doctor that my first aid, making her drink water, had saved her. "How did you make me drink water when I was unconscious?" I stammered at her sudden question, and her face quickly turned pale. "Did you force yourself on me?" Faced with Ms. Roberts' intense gaze, I looked away and nodded yes silently. "No, that's impossible. Disgusting. Get out of my sight right now." Shouting and throwing a pillow at me, she chased me out of the hospital room. Why am I being treated so unfairly when I saved her life? This is what's really impossible. I muttered angrily to myself as I quietly left. A few days later, Ms. Roberts was discharged and went on a 3-day business trip, leaving me on standby at home. Mr. James prefers lighter meals than this menu. Also, since this place is popular, you should make a reservation 3 days in advance. Thank you, Mike. You really know everything. 3 days later, back at the office, I supported the female employees in the secretarial department until Ms. Roberts returned. In the afternoon, I was summoned to the CEO's office. When I opened the door, Ms. Roberts was waiting with a stern look on her face. I stood in front of her desk and asked firmly, "What can I do for you?" After a brief silence, Ms. Roberts spoke. "You don't think you can get away with what you did, do you? How do you plan to take responsibility?" Responsibility? "Ms. Roberts, I performed a life-saving act because you were at risk of acute alcohol poisoning." "It's your excessive drinking. Despite my warnings, that caused this." I responded indignantly, making her face turn red with anger. Still, forcing water into an unconscious woman with mouth-to-mouth is disgusting. Being called disgusting made me angry, and I replied sharply, "Let me be clear. My job is to support you. Protecting your life is part of that duty. There was no other way to get you to drink water. Can you swear that's the truth? Only you know what's in your heart. You could say anything. Frustrated by her misunderstanding, I was fed up. If you can't trust me, just fire me right away. I said bitterly, although she seemed a bit flustered. She declared firmly. Fine. You're fired. Don't come in tomorrow. Are you sure? Even if I'm gone? When I asked quietly, she showed obvious agitation. There are plenty of secretaries. You're not special. Don't be conceited. All right then, thank you for everything. I turned around and reached for the door handle. Wait. You're fired starting tomorrow. Do your job properly today. Stopping by the door, I returned to my desk without meeting her eyes and started working. After 5 p.m., I finished the handover notes for my successor, completed some meeting materials for the week, and attached Ms. Roberts' schedule for the month before shutting down my computer. Then, I approached her desk and spoke softly. Ms. Roberts, today is my last day. But I have one last thing to say. She looked up at me with a slightly tense expression. When you feel belittled because of your youth or gender, take a breath before speaking. You tend to get emotional. So be particularly careful about that. I placed her usual coffee on the desk. I've documented how to make this coffee and how to interact with clients in the handover notes, so please rest assured. After saying that, I thanked her and opened the heavy door. As I closed the door, I glanced back and saw Ms. Roberts standing up, looking like she wanted to say something. But I quietly closed the door and left the company. After quitting, I felt a sense of loss and lethargy, spending my days idly at home. One day, I received a call from my successor. It seemed there was trouble with Continent Trading, and the contract was on the verge of being cancelled. Ms. Roberts is doing her best, but Mr. Thompson won't budge. The executives keep telling me to consult with you. I'm not an employee at the company anymore. You need to support Ms. Roberts properly. I retorted, but the secretary pleaded desperately. I can't do it. Ms. Roberts wants you back. She always looks at the coffee cup you gave her, looking lonely. She's surely thinking of you. I listened silently to the secretary's words. The client, Mr. Thompson, insists that Ms. Roberts attend the meeting alone. As a secretary, I don't know what to do. But I cut off the secretary's rambling call and lay back on the couch. What happens to her is none of my concern. I'm not involved anymore. Really not. Trying to convince myself of that, I lay on the bed and closed my eyes, but the image of Ms. Roberts working so hard still came to mind. Being underestimated as a young woman, treated like a child, and striving desperately to prevent unfavorable contracts. Why do I keep thinking about her? Why am I thinking about her so much when I never worked for her sake? Continent Trading. Wait. Mr. Thompson, that must be it. I called the secretary back and asked for the date and time of the meeting, making some preparations. On the day of the meeting, I arrived at a certain restaurant. This was a secluded, quiet place in the mountains, often used for hosting important clients. I timed my entrance carefully. I made eye contact with the familiar owner and was led to a specific room. When I reached the room, I dismissed the owner and slowly opened the sliding door. As expected, Ms. Roberts, drunk and unable to stand, was being held by Mr. Thompson. What the hell are you doing here? Nice to see you again, Mr. Thompson. I'm Mike. What are you doing here? This meeting is supposed to be private. Mr. Thompson, already red-faced from drinking, shouted even more angrily. Ms. Roberts is too drunk to negotiate properly. I've brought someone else to join us. With that, I invited into the room Tom, the chairman of Continent Trading, and Mr. Parker. Both of them frowned as they looked down at Mr. Thompson. Tom and Mr. Parker. Dad. Ms. Roberts, still dazed, saw her father approach with a smile. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to show you our top executive in such a state. Thank you for looking after her. Mr. Parker's tone was gentle, but his face, deeply furrowed with anger, glared at Mr. Thompson. Well, she just drank a little too much and got dizzy. Mr. Thompson stammered, clearly panicked. Mr. Tom then shouted, "Disgraceful," and promised to contact us later, before leading Mr. Thompson out of the room. Left with the three of us, there was a moment of silence before Mr. Parker spoke up. "It's disgraceful for a leader to show such a pathetic display. I'm sorry. I was offered alcohol and couldn't refuse." With Mr. Thompson gone, Ms. Roberts, now relieved, slumped against the wall. Mr. Thompson has been targeting Ms. Roberts for a while, waiting for an opportunity like this. He used this trouble to make his move. I explained, and Ms. Roberts, realizing how easily she was tricked, hung her head in regret. But she was safe. Feeling relieved, I decided to go home. "I'll be taking my leave now," I said, and headed to the door when Ms. Roberts called out to me. "Wait. I still have something to say." Stopped by her, I turned around to see Ms. Roberts struggling to sit upright. "I appreciate what you did today. I'm allowing you to return to the company. Please come back as my secretary." "No," I declined. "What? Why?" "I'm saying you can come back." I finally expressed what I'd been holding back. "I've been supporting you as an executive, more than just an ordinary secretary. But you never listened to anything I said." Ms. Roberts, with a solemn expression, listened to me intently as I spoke. "I might have been harsh at times, but it was because I wanted you to become a strong leader. That's why I said tough things." At some point, I found myself emotionally pouring out my feelings to her. Even when it came to making coffee, I always tried to prepare it in a way that would help you feel a bit calmer. "But you never understood my feelings." "That's not true." I knew you were doing so much for me, Mike, but I just couldn't say it. I couldn't say thank you." As we both struggled to find the right words, Mr. Parker broke the silence. "Haha, it seems neither of you could express your true feelings. You guys are still quite immature, aren't you?" We could only stare at Mr. Parker without responding. "Now that you've finally shared your feelings, why not go back to being partners?" Surprised, we looked at each other, and our faces turned bright red the moment our eyes met. "I also ask you, Mike. Please support Emily, both professionally and personally." "What? Personally?" "Yes. You see, in our family, there's a tradition of marrying the first person you kiss. It would be a shame to disregard our ancestors' wishes." Stunned by Mr. Parker's words, I was at a loss for words. "Or do you find Emily unacceptable?" Mr. Parker's expression hardened as he questioned me. "No. Ms. Roberts is wonderful. But our social standings are different, and I'm not sure I'm suitable." I hesitated, but Ms. Roberts quickly interrupted. "Looks and family background don't matter. I want you by my side, Mike." Her eyes seemed to glisten with a hint of tears as she looked up at me. "Emily has said it herself. Please continue to support her. She's been so down since you left. She needs someone as reliable as you." But I knew Mr. Parker was asking because I was her first kiss. While I struggled to find an answer, Mr. Parker suddenly spoke again. "Oh, don't worry about the family tradition. It's an old story, and it's no longer relevant. That's not the issue." I turned to Ms. Roberts. "Emily, do you really want me?" I sat beside her and gently asked. She nodded quietly yes. "Then I leave her in your care, Mike." With a smile, Mr. Parker left the room, leaving us alone, both feeling a bit embarrassed and sharing a small, awkward laugh. "Ms. Roberts, Mr. George from Continent Trading is on the line. How should I handle it?" "Tell him I'll call back in 30 minutes. "Understood." I returned to the secretarial department, back to my role as her secretary. Continent Trading had changed their CEO, with a new female CEO from the UK. The chairman of Continent Trading arranged a meeting to introduce the new CEO and apologize for the previous incident, scheduled for tomorrow. Continuing my duties as a secretary, I requested to remain as the CEO's personal secretary, as before. This time, it wasn't to infiltrate the core of the company, but for a different purpose. "I'll listen to your advice from now on, but please don't be too harsh." "No, you've grown enough as an executive. There's nothing more I need to advise you on." "Then why did you ask to stay as my secretary?" She blinked in surprise. "Well, no particular reason. I just want to keep an eye on any shady characters who might approach you. That's the enough reason. I'm glad to know you care about me. Now that no one's around, can you call me by my name? Since we started dating, Emily had become quite affectionate, perhaps because she had never had anyone to lean on before. This is the office, so we need to be professional. Hey, wait. Alright. But you have to make me soup every morning. Emily's newfound affectionate personality made me a bit uneasy. But as she wrapped her arms around my neck from behind, I resolved to support her wholeheartedly from now on. The beautiful woman in front of me suddenly clapped her hands and said, "I like it." As I stood there bewildered, she handed me her business card. It had Emily Smith written on it, and her title was, "What?" I stared at her in shock. "My name is Alex, 31 years old." Maybe I arrived too early. I hesitated to enter the charming inn nestled quietly in the mountains. Check-in time was at 3 p.m. It was still only 1 p.m. I intended to enjoy a leisurely drive through the mountain roads alone. But I ended up arriving much sooner than expected due to my excitement about the inn. When I quietly entered, a beautiful woman in a classy dress greeted me. "Welcome. Are you here to stay?" I hesitantly replied. "Yes, but I arrived a bit too early. Can I wait in the lobby?" I worried I was being presumptuous, but she smiled warmly and said, "Of course. Please make yourself comfortable. If your room is ready early, we'll be happy to show you in." "No worries, that would be too much. I actually enjoy being in the lobby even after checking in. Just letting me stay here is more than enough." I explained flusteredly, and she smiled and said, "I see. If you need anything, please feel free to ask." She then left. Her graceful manner and walking were beautiful. I followed her with my eyes for a moment, then sat down on a luxurious sofa in the lobby. Sitting on such a grand sofa by myself, I took out a paperback book. Reading in the lobby is one of my favorite parts of traveling. After a while, the entrance to the inn opened. A woman entered alone. Listening closely, it seemed she had also arrived early like me. She also sat down in the lobby to wait. She sat on a sofa 2 tables away from mine, set up her laptop, and began to work. She was stunningly beautiful. With slightly upturned, almond-shaped eyes and long lashes. Her slender face was sharp and elegant, and she had an excellent figure. She crossed her slim legs gracefully and sipped her coffee. Her laptop must have finished booting up. She started typing away on the keyboard. Today, I'm surrounded by beautiful women, I thought to myself, feeling lucky. Just then, I heard a small exclamation, "Oh no," from the innkeeper. She seemed confused behind the reception. She kept getting up and sitting down, sometimes lightly tapping the computer, muttering, "What should I do?" before heading to the back. Male staff members came out one after another, trying to work on the computer, all looking troubled. "What should we do? We can't access the guest's information like this." Hearing that, I stood up without thinking. I rummaged through my bag, took out a business card, and approached the reception. "Excuse me," I called out, and the innkeeper looked a bit startled but then politely said, "Oh, I'm sorry for the disturbance." "No, it's not that. Here, this is who I am." I handed her my business card. She looked closely at the card, and I explained. "You can't access the guest information, right? My company created that system, and I was involved in its development. If you don't mind, I can take a look at it for you." She finally understood after seeing the company name on the card. "Are you sure? I'm sorry to trouble you on your vacation," she said apologetically, her eyebrows furrowing in concern. "Of course. If it's a bug, it's our fault. We're the ones who should apologize." With that, I was allowed behind the reception. In fact, I had come to stay at this inn to check if the system I developed was working properly. This inn recently introduced a daytime stay plan, prompting them to update their system. They commissioned our company to create this system. Seeing my work being used satisfactorily was one of the rewarding aspects of my job. But encountering a bug like this was unexpected. Thinking that, I started up the system. However, it immediately shut down. Relieved that the computer itself was still operational, I began entering commands into the system while asking the innkeeper some questions. Did the system suddenly shut down? What were you doing when it happened? Sensing her anxiety, I added, Don't worry, you didn't break it. Knowing what you were doing at the time helps identify the bug. Please tell me anything you remember. My words seemed to reassure her. Well, I was entering room numbers. I think it happened when I was adding a note for a guest who needs assistance. It seems something specific triggered the issue. I carefully checked the input-related code and made necessary corrections. 30 minutes later. When I restarted the system, it launched successfully. I opened several windows to ensure there were no issues and then said, I think it should be fine now. Please try entering the information that caused the error earlier. The innkeeper nervously operated the computer and successfully completed the input. Oh, thank you. It worked. I'm so relieved. Please let me thank you somehow. Feeling humbled, I replied, No, really. It was our fault for delivering a defective product. I'm sorry for the trouble. I hastily said this and decided to return to the lobby. The innkeeper seemed like she wanted to say more, but she returned to her work to make up for the lost time. As I approached the sofa where I was originally sat on, I heard a voice, Hey. It was the beautiful woman with the laptop from earlier. Seeing my confusion, she asked, Are you good with computers? I am. I'm a system engineer. She smiled and said, My laptop's been acting up. Could you take a look at it? I'll make it worth your while. Dizzy from her smile, I nodded in agreement and took a look at her laptop. A strange screen keeps popping up, she explained. Upon checking, a peculiar character appeared every few minutes. After investigating, I found a suspicious file. Did you download anything today? I asked. She replied, No, I was just connected to the internet for work. I showed her the screen. This file was downloaded a few minutes ago. It's not a virus, but if you don't recognize it, can I delete it? She nodded yes, so I deleted the file. I think it should be fine now. I handed her laptop back. As she checked her laptop, the innkeeper brought over some coffee. Thank you for earlier. Would you like some coffee? You too, miss. Placing the coffee down, she smiled. Can I have some too? The woman raised her head from her laptop, surprised. Of course. The innkeeper replied with a smile, then turned to me. Thank you again for your help. It was very kind of you. If we have any more issues, can we contact your company for assistance? I nodded in agreement. Yes, that's fine. I plan to retire soon, but I'll make sure my colleague takes over. The innkeeper looked disappointed. Really? That's too bad. I gave a faint smile. Could I borrow my business card for a moment? I took the card from the innkeeper and wrote down the name of a trusted colleague. If you need anything, please contact this person. They're even more reliable than I am. The innkeeper smiled as she took the card and said, Thank you, before leaving. As I admired her poised figure, I heard a voice. Are you really quitting? You're so skilled. Were you headhunted by another company? Her abrupt questions caught me off guard, but I answered honestly. No, the company is struggling financially. They asked for voluntary resignations, so I stepped up. Her eyes widened. You volunteered? Why? Her straightforwardness was oddly comforting. I'm single and free. All my colleagues are either married or have partners, so they would be in trouble if they suddenly lost their jobs. She laughed. You're too kind. I thought for a moment. Maybe. I just didn't want to see everyone panic. I have no regrets. She smirked. You're really kind. But I don't dislike that. Her words flustered me. Well, the current company just churns out products without thorough checkups. I want to do more meticulous work. But I haven't lined up another job yet. My rushed words revealed a truth I hadn't even admitted to myself. I had come to this in hoping to see my system working flawlessly. Instead, I saw it encountering bugs. With more thorough checks, these bugs could have been fixed before delivery. That was that kind of easy mistake. I pondered this with a somber expression. The beautiful woman suddenly clapped her hands and said, "I like you." I looked puzzled, and she handed me her business card. It had Emily Smith written on it, and her title was, "What? CEO?" I stared at her in shock. "Yes. I'm Emily, the CEO of a moderately successful IT company I founded in my 20s. Call me Emily." She introduced herself with a smile and a wink. As I stood there bewildered, she asked, "And your name?" I handed her my business card and said, "I'm Alex." "Alex. I tested you earlier," Emily said, tapping her laptop. "Ah, that file." She smirked. "Yes, it was a setup. Did you notice? I embedded a hastily made file." I frowned. "You tested me?" She straightened her posture a bit. "Watching you at the reception, I quickly realized you're quite skilled as a systems engineer. I just wanted to see your character. Seeing you rush to help the innkeeper told me you were a good person, but I wondered if you'd help a stranger like me too." Her words made my heart race. "I was planning to headhunt you, but since you're leaving your job, it simplifies things. How about joining my company? I guarantee you'll find it rewarding." We discussed the terms and job details for an hour, and I decided to join Emily's company. A few months later, I was thriving at her company. The distance required me to move, but the job was fulfilling and involved meticulous transactions, making it my ideal workplace. Being a startup, the employees were friendly, and even someone as shy as me quickly fit in. All the single male employees admired Emily. And why wouldn't they? Emily's style in the office was simply very attractive. She wore clothes that accentuated her figure, often donning tight skirts. As the CEO, she wore only high-quality outfits and always smelled wonderful. The female employees also looked up to and revered her. When I heard she was 40, I was shocked beyond belief. Whenever I completed a task Emily assigned me and brought it to her, she was always surprised. "You're done already?" Hearing that made me anxious. "Oh, maybe I should check it again." As I turned to go back, Emily would laugh and stop me. "How many times have you checked it?" "It's fine, I trust you. I'm just impressed by how fast you are. You're really amazing. I'm lucky to have gotten you without any competition from your previous company." Her words made me want to exceed expectations every time. Emily really knew how to manage people well. Emily's company was a great place to work, and after Christmas, we went on break. Our work often involved sudden tasks, which sometimes required working on holidays. However, Emily ensured we had plenty of time off during the Christmas holidays, arranging it with our clients from the beginning. To handle emergencies, calls to the company were forwarded to Emily. I wondered if she could ever truly relax, but she just laughed it off, saying, "That's part of the job as CEO." While I was enjoying my Christmas holiday, a message came through on my phone. It was from the company group chat. Emily had posted, "Urgent. A system issue at the call center operation on Christmas holidays. Anyone available to help, please respond." As I fumbled to reply, responses from other employees started coming in. "Sorry, I'm back in my hometown. I can help remotely. I'm out with my family, but I can come in if needed." It seemed no one was immediately available. I finished typing my response. "I'm ready to go. I'll head out now. Please enjoy your holidays, everyone." I sent the message, got ready, and left the house. While traveling, more messages had piled up. They read, "Thanks, Alex. Alex, Emily. Thank you. Let us know if you need more help, we'll return." Emily had also sent a message, "You're too kind," which made me chuckle. When I arrived at the office, Emily was already there. "Sorry to drag you in on New Year's Eve," she said gratefully. "You're here too, Emily." "I was just lounging around by myself," I replied, making her laugh softly. "Really, you're too kind. Enjoy your holidays, everyone, such a nice thing to say," she remarked, making me blush a bit. "All right. With you here, it's like having an extra 100 people. Let's get this done," she said enthusiastically, and I followed her lead. We worked from the afternoon until night. Fortunately, the issue wasn't too severe. Some bookings from a particular department weren't reflected in the system. But they managed by handling those bookings via email and inputting them manually in an unaffected department. Relieved that it was resolved in time for a busy New Year's Day. We reported to all relevant parties and started cleaning up, finishing past 10 p.m. As we stepped outside, the cold air stung our skin. Our breath turned white in the frigid air. I buried my face in my scarf as Emily and I started walking. It's cold, isn't it? Yeah, it's New Year's Eve. Maybe it'll snow, Emily replied. We made small talk. She said she wanted to stop by a convenience store, so I accompanied her. As soon as we entered the store, the warmth made us both smile. Oh, maybe I'll buy something to eat, she said, wandering through the store. Maybe I'll get some too. I think I'll buy some too, I said, following Emily. There was only one pre-packed food left. We both paused for a moment. You take it, Emily. I wasn't really planning to eat something tonight, I said, offering it to her. Emily burst out laughing. I knew you'd say that. You're such a nice guy. Her words made me blush. No, seriously. It's not a problem. As I tried to explain, Emily glanced around and found something in the frozen section. She picked up a package. Then how about this? We can eat it together at my place. In her hand was a pack of frozen chicken nuggets enough for two. Wait, together, at your place. Before I could process what she said, Emily was already heading to the cashier. Yeah, my place is close by. If you miss the last train, you can take a taxi home. Emily was concerned about something entirely different from what I was worried about. But wait. I'm a guy, and you're a woman living alone. I stammered, chasing after her as she briskly walked out of the convenience store. Emily laughed heartily. Come on, what could happen? You're 31, and I'm a 40-year-old woman. Stop worrying and let's go. She laughed it off and kept walking. Wait. Didn't she realize how attractive she was? Even at 40, her figure and beauty were undeniable. But I had given a proper warning. I asked if it was okay for me as a man to enter her home. She said it was fine. So, I'll take her up on the offer. This might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I made up my mind and followed Emily. As soon as I entered her apartment, a sweet fragrance filled the air. The sweet fragrance that always surrounded Emily filled the entire room. Her apartment was tidy. There weren't many belongings. I just did a big cleanup, she said, preparing coffee. She told me to sit wherever, so I chose a small sofa. I felt incredibly nervous. After a while, Emily brought over some hot coffee and also a bottle of champagne with glasses. You can drink, right? I saw you drinking at the company party. The amber liquid fizzed pleasantly as she poured it into the elegant glasses. The sound of the bubbles was soothing. And Emily raised her glass. She clinked her glass against mine and said, "Good job. I'm glad you were here, Alex." Just hearing those words made my heart race. I downed my champagne in one gulp. I sat on the sofa while Emily sat on another sofa. As she adjusted her legs, Emily asked, "By the way, Alex, aren't you visiting your parents?" "Oh, I already did. My sister's family is coming for New Year's, and it's so noisy. I have 3 sisters, and the whole family." "How many are coming again?" 13. The youngest is 3, so I end up being their playmate. There's no place for me, so I always go home early. Leave the Christmas gifts for the kids, and leave. Emily burst into laughter, clearly surprised. At my previous job, someone always had to work during the holidays, so I took my break early and worked on the Christmas holiday. This was the one thing I appreciated about the old job. This year, I also thought about how to make an excuse, but in the end, I got my break early and told my family I was working on the holidays and advanced going home. Having 3 sisters must be tough. A potential spouse might be scared off. I couldn't handle it. Hearing that, I felt a bit deflated. And I hesitantly asked, "Emily, are you not planning to get married?" Her face clouded at the question. I'm too strong-willed to get married. Everyone at the company probably calls me boss lady behind my back. It's true that Emily is strict at work. But that strictness only makes her more attractive. What are you talking about? Emily, everyone looks up to you. When I said that, she blushed slightly. You say such nice things. Now, drink up. She poured more champagne, almost as if to hide her embarrassment. Well, it might be my chance now. There was something I wanted to tell Emily. I felt it was rude to say it from far, so I moved to sit next to her. Emily looked puzzled. Emily, thank you for inviting me to your company back then. I appreciated her deeply. At that time, honestly, I was at rock bottom. I wanted to work carefully, but at the end, the system I delivered had bugs. I was actually on the verge of quitting and using up my leave. I was in a rush to find the next job. When I thanked her, Emily gave a soft smile. That was a connection you attracted, Alex. Wanting to work carefully drew me to you. I share the same approach to work. Emily propped her chin on her hand, sipping her champagne. That saved me. Your company's approach is really meticulous, and it's the ultimate white-collar environment. I get to work the way I want. And I'm really happy now. Maybe slightly drunk, Emily leaned closer to me. Plus, you're happy working with your dream girl? Hearing that, I turned bright red and nodded yes. Emily laughed. Hey! That's where you're supposed to make a joke. I shook my head vigorously. Emily, you really are my dream girl. Emily gave me a dreamy look. So, will you take me? Her words made my heart leap. No. But you're everyone's dream. Someone like me. I can't. I'm not worthy. When I hastily denied it, Emily smiled. Will kind-hearted Alex give me up too? Her upward glance made my blood boil. I don't want to give you up. I'm happy just seeing you. But I don't want anyone else to marry you. When I confessed, Emily gave a wry smile. What do you mean? Are you telling me not to get married? Those words gave me a sudden push. Will you marry me? Emily finished her champagne. If your sisters are okay with me, then sure. I couldn't tell if she was serious or teasing. I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat. Then I pulled Emily close. Hey, wait. We took a selfie together and posted it in the group. I sent the message, "This is my future wife." Emily, who seemed to sober up quickly, panicked and said, "Delete it." Right now, but my sisters had already read it. Emily turned pale. Don't worry, it will be fine. As I said that, messages started flooding in. No way. You have such a beautiful girlfriend? She looks amazing. Bet she's great at her job. Hurry up and introduce us. I want to get to know her, filled the screen, and I chuckled. Really? Are you sure about me? I'm about 10 years older. Won't your parents have a problem with that? Emily, who was always so confident, seemed unusually demure. That side of her tugged at my heartstrings. My parents are fine with it. I showed her the next message. It read, "Looking forward to welcoming another wonderful daughter into our family." After having chicken nuggets for New Year's Eve, we went out to see fireworks. Honestly, things were moving so fast that I could barely keep up. But Emily and I were holding hands, waiting for the countdown. Yes, we are holding hands. My heart was pounding loudly. It feels like a dream, doesn't it? Her words made me nervous. When I first met you at the inn, I thought, what a kind person. I was surprised to hear that. But I was from the company that made that system. Emily smiled and shook her head. After that, you helped me with my computer even though we didn't know each other. I couldn't say no to a request from a beautiful woman. At that moment, I thought I'd love to work with this person. And I also thought, if this cute guy were my boyfriend, he'd love me so much. I turned red at her words. Saying cute isn't exactly a compliment for a guy. I said, trying to hide my embarrassment. Emily burst into laughter. We arrived at the downtown. I can't believe Emily is my girlfriend. I hope we can get married this year. As the New Year's fireworks set off, I made such a selfish wish in my mind. Emily came close and whispered, "I wished to marry you." Was that too much? I shook my head vigorously and said I wished for the same. The New Year's fireworks were echoing. Even if I'm supposed to rid myself of desires, my feelings for Emily won't stop. I want to get rid of everything but my desire for Emily and spend a happy year together with Emily. With that wish in mind, we quietly looked up to the New Year's fireworks,